The searing heat of the explosion still burned in my mind as I opened my eyes to a freezing wind. My calloused hands were no longer holding a rifle, but were covered in the grime of a common peasant. Memories that were not mine flooded my brain, revealing my new identity as Lu, a lowly hunter in the border village of Wuan. If fate had given me a second life in this brutal era, I would not spend it dying in the mud. Outside, the village was gathered for a grim event that the original Lu had been dreading. Several women from a fallen noble clan were being auctioned off as wives to the village men. Among them stood a woman whose gaze remained fixed on the horizon, refusing to bow to her circumstances. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the whispers of the men who saw me as a useless coward. I pointed my finger directly at the proud woman and announced that she would be my wife. Sang Yushi looked down at me, her eyes widening at the unexpected intensity in my stare. The village head laughed, mocking me for choosing the woman no one else wanted because of her noble pride. I ignored the laughter and led her back to my small cold shack without a word. Inside the hut, I handed her my only blanket and told her to rest while I found us food. She looked around the barren room, clearly wondering how a hunter with nothing could protect her. I grabbed my old horn bow and checked the tension of the string with professional precision. My modern knowledge of anatomy told me exactly where the weaknesses of the local mountain prey would be. I stepped out into the waist-deep snow, moving with a silent efficiency that the villagers didn't know I possessed. For hours, I tracked the scent of a large deer through the frozen thickets of the mountain. Suddenly, the wind shifted, and I detected a scent that didn't belong to any animal. The smell of unwashed bodies and horse sweat drifted from a nearby ridge. I dropped low to the ground, utilizing the white snow as a natural camouflage for my light furs. A Yuan barbarian scout was scanning the valley, his hand resting on the hilt of a curved saber. He was an advanced scout, meaning a raiding party was likely not far behind him. I notched an arrow, breathing slowly to stabilize my heart rate, just as I had been trained in the special forces. I aimed not for his chest, but for the narrow gap in his armor at the base of his neck. The arrow hissed through the air, finding its mark before the scout could even register the sound. He collapsed without a cry, his body sliding down the rocks into a hidden crevice. I quickly moved to his location, stripping him of his weapons and a map I found in his vest. This wasn't just a random scout. The markings on the map indicated a full-scale village raid planned for the next moon. I couldn't return empty-handed, so I downed the deer I had been tracking with a single, quick shot. Dragging the massive animal back to the village, I arrived as the stars reached their peak. The villagers stared in disbelief as the man they called a loser brought home enough meat to feed a family for a month. I kicked open the door to my hut and dropped the carcass on the floor in front of my new wife. Sang Yushi looked from the meat to me, a flicker of respect finally replacing her cold indifference. I told her to start preparing the meat because we needed the strength for what was coming. She asked what I meant, and I showed her the Yuan Scout's blood-stained map. Her noble upbringing allowed her to recognize the military symbols, and her face turned pale. I told her that as long as I breathed, no barbarian would cross our threshold. But deep down, I knew that the village's defense was non-existent, and the corrupt local commander would likely flee. I spent the rest of the night crafting more arrows, my mind racing through tactical formations for a disorganized militia. As dawn approached, a heavy thud sounded against the outer wall of the village, followed by a scream that cut through the silence. I grabbed my bow and signaled for Sang Yushi to hide, as the sound of galloping hooves grew deafening. The raid had started much sooner than the map indicated, and the first torch was already flying through the air toward our roof. The flaming torch arched through the night sky like a falling star of ill omen. I reacted instinctively, swinging my hunting spear to swat the fire away from our dry roof. Sang Yushi huddled near the doorway, her eyes wide with the terror of a woman who had lost everything once before. I grabbed my heavy hornbow and shouted for her to stay low and away from the windows. Outside, the rhythmic thunder of galloping hooves shook the frozen ground of the village square. The Yuan barbarians screamed war cries that sounded more like hungry wolves than men. I climbed onto the low stone wall surrounding our courtyard to get a better vantage point. My Special Forces training kicked in as I assessed the enemy's formation and numbers. There were 12 riders in the vanguard, all carrying spears and short swords. I drew the heavy string of the horned bow back until it creaked with lethal tension. The lead rider was aiming a spear at a fleeing elder when my first arrow took him in the throat. The other barbarians skidded their horses to a halt, confused by the sudden precision of the attack. I didn't give them a moment to recover, loosing 2 more arrows in rapid succession. 2 more riders slumped over their saddles, their lifeblood steaming in the cold night air. From the shadows, the village bully Zhang and his goons were trying to sneak away with stolen grain. Instead of fighting, this coward was profiting from the slaughter of his own people. I realized then that internal rot was just as dangerous as the enemies at the gate. A barbarian captain wearing a heavy iron breastplate spotted my position and charged. I dropped my bow and unsheathed the heavy hunting knife I had sharpened just that morning. As the horse lunged at the wall, I dived forward, rolling beneath the animal's belly. With a single precise stroke, I hamstrung the beast, sending rider and horse crashing into the dirt. I didn't wait for the captain to stand, driving my blade through the gap in his helmet. Zhang the bully saw me kill the captain and tried to pull a hidden dagger on me from behind. Without looking back, I spun and caught his wrist in a grip that snapped the bone like a dry twig. I told him that in my world, there is no place for those who betray their own kin. I ended his treachery with a quick, clean strike, leaving his body among the enemy dead. The remaining Yuan scouts, seeing their leader fallen, blew a retreat horn and vanished into the woods. I stood alone in the center of the village, my clothes stained with the blood of both invaders and traitors. A group of Imperial soldiers approached, led by a man with a stern, scarred face and high-ranking armor. This was Commander Zhao, the man in charge of the border defenses for the entire province. He looked at the bodies of the Yuan scouts, noting the precision of the arrow wounds. He turned to me and asked who had taught a simple hunter to fight like a veteran of the Great Wall. I simply replied that survival was a very effective teacher in these lawless lands. Zhao declared that Quishan village needed a leader who actually knew how to win a fight. He pulled a copper badge from his belt and tossed it to me, appointing me as the new squad leader. For the first time, the villagers didn't look at me with pity, but with a growing sense of respect. Sang Yushi came out of the house, her eyes filling with tears as she saw I was safe and honored. But as I looked at the horizon, I knew this small victory would only draw more attention from the Yuan kings. Furthermore, Zhao's arrival felt too convenient, as if he knew the raid was coming. I noticed a strange symbol on the hilt of Zhao's sword that matched the one on the barbarian captain's gear. If the Imperial military was in league with the barbarians, my life was in more danger than ever before. Just as I prepared to question the men, a scout screamed that a second, much larger army was approaching from the south, our own province. The dust clouds on the southern horizon signaled the arrival of a massive Imperial detachment. I narrowed my eyes as I noticed the supply wagons were far lighter than they should have been for an army of that size. Commander Zhao met the arriving general with a salute that felt more like a confrontation than a greeting. It became clear within minutes that the provincial reinforcement was here to seize our hard-won loot rather than offer protection. That night, I retreated to my hut to consult the ancient scroll I had recovered from the fallen Yuan leader. The text described a technique called the heavenly lung breath, which promised to synchronize my modern stamina with internal energy. I closed my eyes and followed the rhythmic patterns, feeling a surge of heat blooming in my lower abdomen. My senses sharpened until I could hear the heartbeat of the guard standing 50 paces outside my door. Sang Yushi entered with a bowl of soup, her face reflecting the exhaustion of managing the village's dwindling resources. She whispered that the general was planning to execute the local hunters to cover up the theft of imperial grain. I realized the corruption ran deeper than I thought, and we were being used as scapegoats for the border's failures. I gathered my squad of 12 men in the dead of night, leading them to the narrow canyon known as the Devil's Throat. Using my knowledge of modern guerrilla warfare, I ordered them to dig deep, slanted trenches across the path. We lined the bottom of the pits with sharpened bamboo stakes tipped with the venom of mountain vipers. I supervised the construction of a series of tripwire-activated log swings positioned on the cliff faces. By dawn, the trap was invisible to the naked eye, covered by a layer of light snow and dry brush. Vibrations in the ground told me that a Yuan scouting party was approaching from the north. These weren't just scouts. It was a heavy cavalry unit led by a commander in ornate black iron armor. I let the first 10 riders pass over the hidden pits, waiting for the core of their formation to enter the kill zone. I whistled a sharp, bird-like note, and the earth suddenly gave way beneath the galloping horses. Screams of men and beasts echoed through the canyon as the poisoned stakes found their marks. "Release the deadfall," I roared, and the heavy logs swung down like the pendulums of fate. The logs smashed into the remaining Yuan soldiers, clearing the path with the force of an avalanche. I leaped from the 15-foot height, landing perfectly amidst the chaos with my Dao blade already drawn. My movements were a blur of internal energy-enhanced speed as I decapitated the one lieutenant in a single stroke. My men followed my lead, charging from their hiding spots to finish the disoriented survivors. Within 15 minutes, the entire Yuan patrol of 50 men had been neutralized without a single casualty on our side. We searched the bodies and found a letter from the Imperial General promising to open the gates for a full Yuan invasion. The betrayal was total. The higher-ups were selling out the border people for gold and safety. I ordered my men to collect the Yuan heads and march back to the village square immediately. We arrived just as the general was publicly accusing Commander Zhao of treason. I threw the bloody sack of Yuan ears at the general's feet, silencing the entire square. "Is this the treason you speak of, or were you expecting these men to be your guests?" I shouted. The general reached for his sword, but my arrow was already notched and drawn to his throat. I read the intercepted letter aloud, and the villagers erupted in a roar of righteous anger. Before the corrupt soldiers could react, my squad surrounded them, disarming the traitors with clinical efficiency. Commander Zhao stood up, took the general's seal of office, and officially handed it to me. I accepted the responsibility not for power, but to ensure that Yuan would never be a pawn in their games again. Sang Yushi walked to my side, her hand resting on my shoulder as the villagers cheered our names. With the internal breathing technique mastered and the traitors purged, the border was finally secure. I had risen from a lowly hunter to the protector of the realm, and my true legend was only just beginning.
Hàng độ hàng biên con này cực đẹp. Nói chung nó đẹp không bằng cái con kia, nhưng mà con này so thế này là đẹp. Vì chân của nó đẹp hơn, chân mặt trước nó đẹp hơn con kia. Con này là cùng lứa với con xám lúc đầu nha các bạn nha. Con này cùng lứa với con xám lúc đầu. Nó giống kiểu như anh em với con xám này cả. Cứ thả ra chuồng là đánh nhau. Thực ra con này thì nếu mà để nói vảy phù địa không có, mà nó có một, gần như là nó có một cái vảy đại giáp ở đây. 3 vảy liền nhau chứ không phải là 2 vảy, 2-3 vảy liền nhau ngay cựa nha. Đá thì với là nó có một cái vảy, hai cái vảy